Good morning, haters. Looks like Kendall's ready for a new episode of I Hate Real Estate. I'm Jamie Taylor and my good friend Kendall Grooms here with a new episode of I Hate Real Estate. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good. How are you, Jamie?
I'm good. It's good to have you in the studio. We didn't get to record last week. So COVID cases on the rise, possible exposure. So we had to go through the process and not get to record last week.
Kept us from getting a guest this week also.
Yeah, it did, because now they're in the same situation where they've been exposed.
Yep.
So it's kind of like happening at work, happening at school, kind of all over again. And as things ramp up, I originally was talking to you about let's do the COVID clause, but no. And also, like you said, it's kind of like a hypothetical right now. Everything's
It is. It's so new that there's no cases that have gone through the system. The only things that I've really dealt with in general are these clauses that would allow businesses to close because of the pandemic or a government shutdown and not pay rent and things like that. That's really all that I've dealt with.
Yep. Well, I'm glad that we're back. I'm glad that we are both well and that everything is going okay so far in that arena. So now that we're back, I will tell you that I went out and did some expert testimony without you. It was kind of...
I feel cheated on.
You should. But here's the real truth. It was the most exhilarating experience because, like I told you, I had to bring my baby. So shout out to my friend who gave me the opportunity. And I said, I have my kids that morning, so I can't be in court. He was like, let's bring them. I was like, okay. So I brought them. And then to my surprise, not only did they sat, what is it called? The gallery. They sat in the gallery, but then the judge was like, the baby started screaming. He was like so mad that I left. And the judge reached out and he goes, go get your baby and bring him on the stand. Okay. So anyways, I brought him on the stand and got through it.
What court was this in? You told me and I forgot. It
was down at the Pulaski County Courthouse on Markham, up on the 4th floor. And I forget this judge's name. I'll remember as soon as we get off, I'm sure. But yeah, anyways, so that's where it was, downtown. So it wasn't like all the way in Lone Oak or anything.
Yeah, and it wasn't federal court or anything
no,
like that.
It was just like a local situation, and it was interesting because it was another thing I eventually, that guest in particular is coming on the show in the future and can talk about this particular story of what I was doing there. But essentially, it was a sliver of a piece of land that was owned by someone with a similar name, but he named his sons, 3 of his sons, the same name as his name. So then there were 3 people who owned the property with the same name as him. So anyways, property was sold. Thought we got the right guy, but apparently it was not the right guy.
That happens.
I bet it does happen all the time. So another interesting facet of real estate for us to discuss in the future. But today, we're going to talk about a snake-bitten situation. Mm-hmm. Tell me the quote about being snake-bit.
Once it's snake-bit, it stays snake-bit. We say that all the time because it's true. It happens.
Yeah, and what you mean by that, too.
You get a snake-bit situation. Yeah, you get a situation where something goes awry and you think, okay, they've hired a lawyer now, we're fixing to cure this situation, and every time we turn around and we find out something new about the case, new about the property, new about the facts, whatever it may be, it just will continue to get worse and worse, where it's harder and harder to fix.
It's like an onion.
Yes. And then you'll get, if we go have a hearing or something on an issue in front of the judge, not necessarily a final trial, you'll think, oh yeah, we're definitely going to win this hearing, we're going to get what we're asking for in this deal. Then you lose that. You get a setback, or you don't get exactly what you want, or the judge views it differently than you do, and you start finding out that there's other facts that you didn't know about from a client, that a client doesn't tell you, and you get all kinds of things where it continues to just be what we call snake bit for long periods of time.
Well, in this case in particular, that snake bit is really like what you said. You started out, it already was a bad situation, and then it continued to here's another layer, here's another layer, here's another layer. And I've kind of been watching it with you from the very start. And now it's kind of all the way down to where the leg probably needs to be amputated. And we're not sure how to get this thing handled. So why don't we just start from the beginning? We're just going to call it the snake bite and talk about, we've talked about little elements of this case on the show before, but we'll go ahead and just get an up to date for our listeners on where we are, but bring it back to the beginning.
Sure. And we haven't talked in detail about this one because it was still pending in the circuit court. It was still pending for some decisions from the judge, and now we're past that point in the state court situation. So I'm comfortable talking about it now. And
we have a whole new type of venom is the thing.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So we started off, we met with 2 clients, a husband and wife. They live here in Arkansas, and they come to us, and they had just bought a brand new house. They moved here. They actually got married remotely. He lived in Arizona. She lived in Arkansas. They knew each other in high school. They grew up on the same street in, I believe it was Ohio. They got married. They ended up, after they each separated. I think she separated from her husband and had a child. They ended up communicating over social media, Facebook Messenger, whatever, ended up dating, get married. He's transferring from Arizona to Arkansas, and they want to buy a house in Arkansas. So this is the first house he's ever bought. It's the second house she's ever had.
And both of them first time in Arkansas.
Well, no, hers, she owned a previous house here in Arkansas. So in her previous house, she had a situation, which she testified to during our trial. She had a situation where she was at her mom's house, and she had a baby, less than a 1-year-old, I believe, maybe right around.
He was like 9 months old, I think. But this is where I used to think she was in Arizona, not him.
Yeah, no, it was him.
That's where I was.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And so she ends up, the baby falls asleep and at her mom's house, and they're like watching TV with the mom. She's watching TV with her mom, and so they decide, you know what, we'll just stay. The baby will wake up, want to eat, and we'll go home at that point in time. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning when they finally leave the mom's house to go home, and they get there, and the house is completely flooded with water, like totally flooded on the inside. She tries to go in the baby's room to get things out of the house, whatever she can recover, and she can't even get the door open because the baby's bed had flipped up against the door, upside down, and the door wouldn't open. So if they had been in this house, this baby would not have lived through it. Of course not. I mean, it was knee-high water in the room. The baby wouldn't have lived through it. It would have flipped the bed, locked the door. She couldn't get in. No telling what she would have. I mean, she couldn't have done anything. It's gut-wrenching to think about it, but at least it did not happen.
I know.
And so she's and her house is in a flood zone. She's in a FEMA flood zone on not the house, the property is. Right. So she has this yard. The bottom right corner sliver of the property is next to this culvert thing that's out there, and that corner of the yard is in a FEMA flood zone. So the house is not, but the corner is.
Well, and even so here's where, like, just going into that from a buyer's perspective, consumer protection area. From my knowledge in the appraisal situation, I would look at that, and when the appraisal is done, they're going to say, is this in a FEMA flood zone? And like for me as a consumer, I'm immediately like, ooh, because I know that even if it's just that corner, like it might flood. And granted, this is her first property, so we'll get to why she wouldn't have been worried about her second one. Okay. However, as a consumer, when you look at flood zone, understand it's flooded there to the point where it has been recorded. Sometimes there's 100-year floods, 500-year floods, but when a catastrophe happens, and there hasn't been a measurable flood zone in that area before, the area is remapped and then put into a flood zone based on the results of situations like that.
And since then, FEMA has remapped that particular property, incorporated the whole property. But it just goes, it's one of those, we do PSAs all the time. It's kind of one of those PSAs that if you're in a flood zone, just a portion of your property, corner of your property, part of the yard, that doesn't necessarily mean that the house can't flood, because it happened here and it happens other places. Getting
more than the guaranteed flood insurance that you have to get to live in a flood zone is a really good idea, because if you only get the insurance that you have to get and don't maybe get those additional limits on personal items, things like that, then you have the claim and it's a whole nother situation.
Well, and FEMA your policy may only cover the area where the flood zone actually is. So it may have covered damages to your yard, which would be a little bit of sod, and not the actual house and the contents and things like that.
Which in that case would literally have been the whole house. So anyways, so she's had this nightmare situation.
Yes. So she's had this major issue with a flood. So when she's the primary one, she's in Arkansas, she's walking around in houses, they're shopping for houses, and she's FaceTiming with her husband, and they're walking through and looking at them he's looking on camera. She's walking through houses with a real estate agent friend of theirs. And she is a former real estate agent herself. And so she's
got some knowledge then.
Yeah, they looked at, doing, right? I don't remember the exact number, but I think they looked at somewhere in the ballpark of 60 houses.
Right, and in this
market. And if there was a flood zone designated on the property anywhere, or any disclosure of a water issue, a flooding issue, it was automatically off the list. She didn't want to deal with, she had, a traumatic experience, didn't want to have anything to do with it. So they finally narrow it down to 3 houses that they really like. And they finally narrow it down to 1 house that they like, and they put in an offer on it. The offer gets accepted. They end up closing on the property. I think it was in March of 2019. They close on this house. So they start moving in, everything else. They've been there, I want to say it was a couple of weeks. It's all fuzzy. We had the trial in this case back in March. So it may have been
because it was in May. I remember thinking in my head, like, May showers. Like, that was...
Yeah. I think
the big rain was in May.
Yeah, I think because her husband, finally got transferred up there in June, I believe it was, because she was sending him videos of what was going on at the house. So they
poor guy. He's probably thinking I can fix it when I get there.
Yeah.
I'll dig a trench or
Probably. She's there. She's at the house, and the neighbor is being friendly with her and everything else. And the neighbor testified that finally she couldn't take any more of hiding something from somebody, and she disclosed to her what had happened in the past at this property and in this cul-de-sac. The house
This is
was
one
in a
part I
cul-de-sac.
didn't know about, by the way,
Yeah.
because we were already in court. But oh my gosh, the neighbor's the one who originally told her.
Yeah, the neighbor told her. And so the neighbor's like, I just want you to know that this cul-de-sac and our neighborhood and your yard in particular has major flooding issues. And she's like, what? Yeah. And the neighbor says, yeah, I've got all these videos, recordings. We've been dealing with the city on this issue for 3 years because it has to do with the storm drains in the neighborhood. The news has been out here and reported a story about our cul-de-sac in particular. She knows none of this. That she's learning it for the first time after she's bought the property, not disclosed.
Which she did receive a disclosure and sign off on a disclosure.
And so,
no
as
information.
we've talked about before, when you go through the seller's disclosure form in any real estate transaction, there's a list of things where you check yes and no in the boxes. And in this particular instance, there's one that talks about has water ever stood on the property, under the property, within any of the improvements, under any of the improvements. That box was checked no. There's another one, a catch-all, that says, is there anything at all about the property that would affect the desirability or the marketability of the property? That's kind of the catch-all. It was checked no. There's another one about flooding and drainage issue. There's another one about drainage, grading. I can't remember exactly what it says, but it's drainage was the key word because we recovered text messages that talked about how bad the drainage was in the neighborhood. All those boxes were checked no. There was nothing on the seller's disclosure form that would indicate that there was any problem with water at this property, and it wasn't in a FEMA flood zone.
Ugh.
Yeah. And so
There's also a section that says notes. So even if none of those questions were applicable, and I did think about this, like, what if she didn't understand the question? What if they didn't understand how it was asked? There was like a notes section that's like, hey, general information about the property. This is something that would come to mind.
Should have.
Yeah.
But
no, it would come to mind. We both know it would come to mind.
So the neighbor sends these files that she's got, and it turns out it's dozens of pictures, videos, everything else of the property, their house, the neighbor's house, the cul-de-sac, the neighborhood in general, and it's on there's an issue over a particular weekend that was right before they had made the offer on the property, and the way that these people listed the house, they actually originally tried to sell it for sale by owner because there were other houses for sale on their street. And they thought, hey, there'll be people driving up and down the street looking at these other houses. We'll put a for sale by owner sign in our yard, try to save the commission. So a lot of the videos that we have that the neighbor took of water all up in the yard and next to the house and running adjacent to the house, up against the house and standing in the cul-de-sac to the extent that it actually damaged someone's car. Water got inside of a car in the cul-de-sac. All those videos, the for sale by owner sign is in the front yard.
So that's another interruption, public service announcement, because two things for me on FSBO, consumer and real estate broker, looking at that, I'm going to go two things. One, why are you not using a professional? You know what I mean? First question, why are you not using a professional? Are you hiding something? It's like the first question. And every time I've dealt with a FSBO, there's been some little detail.
Well, and you know how a lot of the FSBOs are. They leave a little flyer in the plastic box next to it. It talks about how great of a house it is, how their families loved it. They've had great times there. It's immaculate. It's been kept in great shape, all these things.
And that's not, and here's the thing. It's like, even if it was a small detail for them, again, they knew, and whatever, even if it was a small detail, if something catastrophic or even slightly obsolescent happens at your house and makes some awkward situation for you, you would mention that on the flyer. But again, it goes back to for sale by owner. For me, I think that's a red flag. I look at it and I go, what's the issue? But then from a broker perspective, I look at that and I go, oh, well, they're trying to save money. At the end of the day, saving money is not the right thing to do for your buyer when you're the seller at the end of the day. If you really want this to go well and you want all parties to be protected, then a good deal works for everybody. And you're going to at least hire somebody who's going to make sure the disclosure and acceptance goes wrong. Sorry, I'm playing with your
That's all right. We're playing footsie.
Here. I know. He's going to hit me with that gavel in a minute. It's going to be over. So go ahead.
Well, there's a difference in just strictly trying to save money in a deal versus listing your house so you don't have to go through certain formalities or particularly...
Well, especially in a non-disclosure
hook someone in that is not going to use a lawyer, and y'all are going to get some contract online or something like that and try to do it.
Those.
Or a realtor. I said lawyer or a realtor, because a buyer can still have a buyer's agent and come in, and it's still going to be on the forms. All the forms are going to be the same way that you would do. So as long as there's even one agent involved, you could still discover some of these things that are disclosed.
And the thing is, I think that, people living outside of Arkansas or listening outside of Arkansas don't understand that we are a non-disclosure state. So the for sale by owner has a different set of rules than when you work with a real estate agent, because working with a real estate agent is automatic need for disclosure, because that's the form we have.
And in a for sale by owner, unless you contract
that you have to do that.
You have to give a disclosure, then there's no requirement that they tell you anything that's going on.
It's another red flag if you're a consumer and you think about buying a for sale by owner. Just make sure you get your own inspection and that you get your own PI, because there's a good chance they're lying if they're selling.
So we start digging through all of this stuff, and there's this 2019 event that occurs over a weekend. There's nighttime pictures on a Friday night.
Like March of 19 or something.
There's, I don't remember. I think it was in October of 18. So because it was right after they listed the property for sale by owner when it happened. Eventually, it never sold for sale by owner, and they listed it with a real estate agent. That's a whole nother part we'll get into. But so you've got these videos. It's over a weekend in October of 2018. And the first night you see water come up in the yard, almost up to the sidewalk at the front of the house. And so this whole, was water ever standing on the property at any point in time? I mean, there it is. That's your disclosure item. It's above the mailbox. There's videos of the person that we sued walking around in the cul-de-sac, filming what's going on in the cul-de-sac. And she says she screams back to her husband, the whole cul-de-sac's flooded. And then later in the litigation, they denied that it's a flood.
Well, it says right on the paper, it's like, has there ever been a flood? Has there ever been any sort of flooding instance? No.
Well, and there's a photograph that the neighbor took of the front of this property in particular, and the husband and wife that were the defendants in our lawsuit are standing on the front porch, looking out at the flood in their yard and cul-de-sac and everything else.
My favorite part was...
So there's no denying.
It's moving, though. So.
Yeah, so that's the next thing. And so the whole drainage deal, we said, well, isn't this... I showed her a picture. Is this your property? Is this front yard your property? Yes. Is there water standing on it? No. That water's draining down through the drain. So it's moving water. It's not standing on the property.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
And it just... I don't know that...
Like when a wave crashes down, it's like... It's a little bit, it's not the same as when a wave comes slowly on the beach. Right. It's two different things, okay?
Yeah.
Water is water. And I think it goes back to the client's wishes, which were number one, to not get into a house that had any water intrusion issues. But let's go ahead and figure out how the snake bite gets infected, because it keeps getting worse, which is the premise for the show.
They learn about this. But then as a part of this video packet that they get talking about the cul-de-sac issues in October of 2018.
Again, this is just the neighbor giving her information. So she hasn't even contacted an attorney yet. She's just getting her info.
They start looking through it, and there's videos from the neighbor standing on her trampoline in her backyard, filming during a rain event this mass of water coming through the backyard.
The affectionately termed river.
Yes, the river. I mean, it is a river running through the backyard under this above ground pool, running down through the yard. There, I mean, it's crazy the amount of water that's there in the back. So now
but it is moving.
Yes, and they say these are not drainage issues. This is the way that the neighborhood was built.
It's just how it works.
Yeah, and that's not true either. So you've got front yard issues, you've got backyard issues. They move in the property. The wife moves into the property. She then starts taking videos after she learns what's going on. And in May, less than 2 months after she moves in, I think it's like 5 weeks afterwards, she's got videos of the backyard during a rainstorm, and water. She walks out afterwards and puts her fingers down in the water, and it goes like part of the way up her hand. It's so deep in the backyard, up against the house, standing there, running across the front porch, everything else. The people that sold it deny that there's any problem in the backyard, that there's never had a problem, never happened. Well, somebody slips up at some point and says, well, yeah, there was this 2018 event, but there was a 2017 event that happened also. It's in these text messages that we recover. For some reason, me and text messages always
You are the literal lawyer of text message
I'm
recovery.
The text message lawyer.
I think it's because you're so IT smart. Like if people don't know that about you,
I think it's just lucky.
No, I don't think so.
So we get this message. We start asking about it, and sure enough, that they disclose a video that they took because we caught them on it, and it is water running up against their back porch. So the way that this house is, there's like a lowered ground level concrete pad that's out there. There's a couple of stairs that run up, and then there's like a covered patio with a fan. You see it on a lot of newer built houses. It's like a bricked in little patio.
It's essentially covered porch in the back.
So it's 3 steps to get up. It's 1, 2, 3. And in the video, it is just, I mean, it looks like the Arkansas, if you were standing on the bank of the river, it looks like the river running by, and it's about this far below the top of that patio.
I feel bad.
I mean, it's inches from coming up on the patio and going in the house.
It's bad. And I feel bad, but ever since we've been talking about the river, that Garth Brooks song has been playing in my head, I swear. And I just don't understand why you wouldn't consider that being an issue. Living there's nobody in in their right mind who would sit there and be like, oh,
so you now have
just a little bit of rain.
You now have 3 separate events in the front yard
17,
that you have
18,
that have occurred.
19.
No, you have a 17 and an 18 event in the front yard. You have constant events that were testified to as, if there's a heavy rain or a long extended rain that causes the ground to get saturated, this is what the backyard looks like. I mean, they admitted that. They knew that happened in the backyard.
It's got to be a heavy rain event, so a moderate rain event doesn't create a problem, so.
But you have the 17 event and 18 events in the front yard, cul-de-sac neighborhood area. And the seller's disclosure form also says, are there any things in the surrounding area that could be detrimental to the value or desirability of your house? It's not just your piece of property only. We talked about this a lot during your expert testimony. Jamie was an expert for us in this case.
This was my favorite experience, though, because here's the thing. You can write analysis. You can go in and talk to somebody about something. You can value property and use your skills to be an expert. But going to court and literally being able to say out loud, these are facts related to your case that have to do with the fact that you're a liar. And this client needs to be justified in their lawsuit. And there's the power that you have, I feel like, is just, it's very empowering to be able to protect somebody's interests that way. Continue.
And so Jamie's there to establish damages and talk about disclosure process and what should have been disclosed and not, and various things like that.
Well, and effects on things that real estate agents might, and that's where and if you're a real estate agent or if you're an appraiser who has a real estate license or whatever, using your skill set to protect a client is really what you're doing. And when you actually go and take your test, it's what are the ethics of a real estate appraiser to promote and protect the public's trust, right? Well, in that process, you're talking about looking at facts related to value that maybe a broker or an agent wouldn't see the same because they don't get trained on functional obsolescence. They don't understand the effect of a value on a property when it is affected by something that you cannot cure. And we're about to get into that because you can't fix this problem. So it's not like you can assign this is the cost that's going to cure it. It's incurable. Yep.
So let's wrap up the case here so we can talk about that. No, I want to talk about that too.
And there's more to come.
Yes. And so eventually we get to trial. We get to this deal where everybody's going to call witnesses. We're going to have a 3-day trial. We've got all of our PowerPoints. We've got opening statements. We've got
depositions on Zoom.
We've got everything. Yeah, we're doing depositions on Zoom. We've got all of our information evidence. We're ready to go to trial. We actually schedule it as a bench trial. It was originally supposed to be a jury trial, but we do it as a bench trial in front of the judge only because we weren't going to be able to have the trial with COVID ongoing. But the judge was willing to let us do it with COVID precautions in place if there wasn't a jury present.
And it was still a year after anyways.
Yep.
Took a year to even get it there.
Yeah, it was March 2021 when we got to try it finally. Finished it on my birthday, actually.
Yeah, happy birthday. Yeah, I didn't know we finished on your birthday.
Yeah, we did.
Now I feel bad that I didn't even get you a cupcake
it's
or
okay.
anything.
It's all good. They brought the court brought donuts.
Oh, well, that was nice.
Oh, very nice.
Okay.
Anyways, we get to trial. We get the seller's wife, who was the person with the most information. She was the one that was handling the transaction. She gets on the stand. Of course, she denies that everything occurs. I've already talked about some of it. Yeah, that's not standing water on my property. It's running down the drain, so it's constantly moving. It's not draining water. And I quote. Well, the person eventually, who listed the property for sale as the real estate agent, turns out she's a 25-year friend of this family that we had sued.
For the record, couple. I'm so glad I wasn't there that day. Yeah.
Continue. And so they think she's the golden bullet. We told her about the events that happened in October of 2018, and she said we shouldn't disclose that because we told her it was just a one-time event. That's what they continue to maintain. This was just a one-time thing. It was an anomaly. Some trash got stuck in a gutter, and that's what caused it to back up. It hasn't happened again. But we already had testimony that it's happened previously in 2017.
By not just one person, but 15 people. Yeah, and it's in writing, witnesses. And there's videos.
Yes.
And
yes. And so
overwhelming evidence is what they call it in court.
And so her friend, who's going to come in and save the day, gets on the stand and testifies. Yes, I told them not to disclose it. Is what she says. That they told me that it was a one-time event, not to disclose it. They've all got smiles on their face. They think, hey, we didn't intentionally do anything. Our real estate agent advised us to do this, which is a PSA to real estate agents, number one,
and brokers,
and to people selling homes. if you have to ask your real estate agent if something should be disclosed, what's the rule?
Yes.
It
has
should
to
be disclosed. And if you're a real estate agent and someone says, hey, this happened at my house, should I disclose this? The answer should be
yes.
Every time, because if you check yes, even if it's one minor event that occurred, and I, as a home buyer, don't investigate that event, ask further questions about that event, do an inspection related to that event, whatever it is, I'm hosed. I'm not in the courtroom. I'm no longer in the courtroom. I have no lawsuit. You bring that to someone like me, and I say, nope.
Nothing.
You're done. You had the chance to investigate. You didn't. You're done. It's over.
I don't know why this is happening to me, but I keep getting these country songs. Now it's check yes or no. Just tell me what happened.
Here's where it all comes around. I get to cross-examine this realtor on the stand. And I kind of had a general idea of what she was going to say when I got up there. Anyways, you usually don't want to walk into a courtroom not knowing, having to ask really important questions without knowing the answers. And so she gets on the stand, and I say, let's look at some pictures. Have you ever seen this picture before of this house with the water in the yard? No, never seen it. Did this seller wife that's your friend actually tell you the water got up this high in the yard? No, she didn't tell me that. Did she tell you about any events in the backyard that had taken place at any point in time? No. Did she tell you about events similar to this one that I'm showing you the picture of occurring the previous year in 2017? No. Did she tell you about the neighbor's car that got damaged because the water got so high in the cul-de-sac in 2017? No. If she had told you all of those things, would you have told her to disclose it? Yes. And that was it. It was over right there. There was nothing else that needed to be asked.
No. And the thing that really got me about the whole situation.
And I take that back. I did not ask the last question because I didn't want to know the answer to the last question. The other party's counsel got up and asked the question about if you would have had them disclose it had they said all those things. And that was Parker and I, so we're sitting there next to each other, and I leaned to him and said, this is a really bad idea. And the answer was yes, I would tell her to disclose it.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, when you are a realtor or a broker, you got to understand that when that question gets asked, you better hope your answer is correct.
And I feel bad for the real estate agent because she got put in a position where
I feel bad
I'm doing this favor. I'm doing this favor for my friend. I'm going to come testify on her behalf. And she ended up almost crying on the stand because she realized that it was very bad. She didn't lie. She did exactly what she's supposed to do on the stand, tell the truth, and it was not good.
So help you God. But this is the thing about it. I feel bad for that particular agent as well, just because her friend lied to her, and that's a difficult situation to get put in as a realtor because you have no control over what someone tells you, and you're trying to represent your party. But if it's a one-time event, not a one-time event, like that, you have to disclose that. I don't care if she did say it was a one-time event. If you told me that it was a one-time event, I'm still going to disclose that a one-time event happened because buyer beware, you have all these other recourse items if it's lied about. But if it's disclosed one time, half a time, maybe you thought it might happen. You know what I mean? Like disclose. That is the lesson that I learned from this case. But anyways, continuing on with the case, because guess what, folks? It's not called I love real estate.
No.
It's worse.
It's I hate real estate.
I hate
it.
Well,
on that note, before we move on to that, there's a prominent real estate agent I took a deposition of one time, and she had somebody attack her about what they should disclose. And she said, they asked her, well, if I have a clog in my toilet and I have to plunge it loose, is that something that I have to disclose years down the road? And she said, exactly. She said, if you have an issue with your toilet that you remember years down the road, you should probably disclose it. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
And so that's the point. If that's something that you really know of, think of, that might be applicable to the situation, disclose it, or you can get in trouble. If you're asking
yourself, think about how the buyer's going to feel of your house too. They're going to come in and get all these little wiggly things about your dishwasher and all these, little tiny things their baby could pull. I was watching that happen. My baby came into the kitchen, and started to reach up because he's getting to that age where he wanted to reach up to the oven. And I thought, oh my gosh, no, I hope this thing isn't loose. And I thought of home inspections. And I thought of, we have a home inspector we use that consistently calls that and loose toilets out. And I thought, I should have asked. But anyway, so
we go on, we finish. The trial finishes. The judge is making his decision. We go sit across.
Which at the end of this, the decision was we're trying to figure out what the damages are.
Really the key is for us what the damages are. We're really comfortable in our position on the facts that we're going to win on what they call liability. On liability, what are the damages? That's where you came in, was to testify about the damages, and I want to talk more about what you did in a second. But ultimately, we prevail. From the compensatory damages standpoint, the monetary reimbursement, we win every penny that we ask for. We had to go back later. The people that we filed the suit against ended up filing bankruptcy.
Which we'll get to.
Well, I don't want to talk about it that much because it still is pending, and
Right.
we've got an upcoming hearing in that case. But they ultimately filed bankruptcy. We're still trying to fight through that and figure out how much money that we're going to be able to recover from them in the end.
Right.
But
it's a sneaky move in the sense that, just in my opinion, how do you know if that was even...
we had a feeling that it might happen.
Right.
And obviously, we advised the clients that it was a possibility of happening. So it wasn't totally unexpected.
Right. But it's one of those things, again, with real estate that you could also think you have recourse as a client. You think, okay, I'm going to sue them and then I'm going to they can file bankruptcy. They can do lots of things to protect themselves. They can keep a case open. They can, you know what I mean? And so that's the part I think, again, from a consumer standpoint, keep in mind when you go into a lawsuit, that doesn't mean the problem's going to get solved. It could be 2 years and you could still be fighting through it.
So let's talk about expert witnesses for a second.
Oh, here we go.
So this is the first time that Jamie, that I know of, ever testified as an expert witness in the courtroom during a trial. Mm-hmm. And my client leans over at one point in time. He's never been in a trial courtroom, nothing. He leans over to me and he's like, "This is the first time she's ever done this." And I'm like, "Yep." He's like, "This is amazing." And so,
you.
yeah.
But
super nice guy. Our client was
nice.
Great. And leans
so
over, and Jamie, when you go into a courtroom, expert witnesses, the way it works is they have to be qualified in the first place. And you have to qualify them on the record. You can't just haul off and call anybody in there. I can't take Aaron in there and just say Aaron's an expert in real estate and him start talking about it. Oh, we're good to go.
No.
You can't do that.
He's a great actor, though, so he could pull that
there you
off
go.
as
So
a
he
problem.
could, yeah. So if we ever have an acting dilemma in the courtroom, he's there. We're there.
You mean like when those people said, this is my acting dilemma, I'm sorry, but this is my quote of the whole thing. We're just not those kind of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Continue.
And so you have to qualify someone. And the way you do that is going through their work history, their experience, what they've done, what they did, what standards that they went by in creating their report, valuation, whatever they do in the real estate market that would be applicable. So we go through all that, and I go through all that with Jamie. We move to qualify as an expert. The other attorney stands up. You've got all this on your wall, right? Mounted.
Well, I did. I took you bound it for me, so I kept it. It's actually right next to the I Hate Real Estate thing I have at home.
Okay. And so she, the other counsel gets up and says she's not qualified. Here's what she didn't do. Here's what she did do. Here's why she's not qualified in this. And she got done with that, asking Jamie questions, trying to clear up her qualification issues, and makes this argument. And I get up, and I have no idea what to say, because every single question she's just asked Jamie, trying to prove she's not qualified, showed more why you were qualified to be there. And I got up, and I guarantee you, I haven't read my portion of the transcript, but it's probably rambling and hilarious because I had no idea. I finally went, "Judge, she's answered every question. I have no idea what I can even say in response." And of course, he qualified you as an expert, as he should have.
Well, and I appreciate that.
And you did a great job with your testimony.
I appreciate that, but I'll tell you right now, I can't tell you, I was not prepared for that. I was not prepared. And if you go in as an expert,
no, you were prepared as an expert.
Oh,
you weren't
yeah, but not prepared for
that.
someone to object. And that's what I think people have to understand about going in expert testimony. If you have no idea what you're walking up against, and keep in mind, if you're protecting a client or testifying on behalf of someone, here's the thing, I had no interest in it. I have no interest in the results of it. I do now because it's over and I get to kind of review it. But at the time, I went in there without ever seeing any of them. I never even spoke to the client until after. So when I sat up there and this other attorney got up, I'm like used to you. So I feel protected and this person's like, "You suck, you're not smart enough to be here." And so then when you popped up and kind of protected me and said, wait, who else has a license from both sides that can see it from both sides? I was like, yeah. Yes. And so then when the judge, so for me, it was like a realization of what was happening. And I never had any thought in my mind that someone would object to me testifying because it just seemed asinine. Sorry. I mean, in the particular situation. And so when you did that for me, it was like, oh, here we go. Someone play the theme music. We're about to go. We're in court.
And the way that they had to do that because they didn't have their own expert in the law in a courtroom setting, if you don't have an expert to rebut or counter what someone else's expert says, what they say, that's the truth. It is the truth unless the judge finds you not to be credible or to be not credible.
But that's what's interesting about it is I would have never called in an expert on that side if I was them anyways. I know why they wouldn't do that because that person would agree. They would be like, this should have been disclosed. Yeah. And so that's the problem is, but my other curiosity is, do their clients feel that way too? Were their clients like, where's our Jamie? Why don't we have one?
That's my question.
Yeah.
That would be my question if I was the the people on the other side.
Right. Well, and at the end of the day, even if we would have gone toe to toe, I wouldn't have been nervous about going toe to toe. I think the big, the piece of advice I would have for somebody who's interested in making more money with their skill set and being able to actually learn about and do things like this is just be prepared for that feeling of going into court. For you, it's no big deal. You're a lawyer.
It was like at the beginning. And
yeah, but when you first start, just like anything else, the very beginning of it is like it's awkward and weird and you don't know how to do it and the judge yells at you and you said that wrong. How many times they told me to slow down? I really thought that I was going to get through this thing with just one. It was like 3 times in the transcript you read, like, Ms. Taylor, can you please slow down? Yeah. But anyways.
I told you that was going to happen.
You did. But my big thing is you're the only other person who can keep
up. The court
with
reporter
that.
knows me real well. We had a big trial in front of the same court reporter, and she always gripes at me for talking too fast. And I told her beforehand, I was like, she's going to talk faster than I am. No way, not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
She's looking at me, staring at me, sitting at the table while you're testifying.
Yeah. Like, can you please? Sorry. Yeah. But anyway, so here's the thing about it, and we won't talk about it in detail, but what we will say is that if you are in a situation where you have to file a lawsuit and you are not sure about the compensatory damages, the client can file bankruptcy, can put you in a situation, but there's, again, recourse there as well. So with you, it's now kind of moved out of the real estate arena, though. So you're kind of dealing with them on a whole different client base.
Kind of. I mean, in bankruptcy in general, you still have to, if you file bankruptcy, you have to value your property.
I was about to say,
personal,
so tell me about how
real, and so we're going to have. There's a dispute about the valuation of the property, so we're still in the real estate realm a little bit with that valuation, but it's strictly getting a value. It's no more about what's gone on in the property, what's gone on in the past, the sales transaction. I mean, some of that's part of it, but not yet.
Well, and it feels like we're at that place now where, it's like, what happened and what are you going to do about it? And that's kind of where we're at right now is what are you going to do about it? Because we're past the lawsuit phase and now we got to figure out how to find damages for the client to actually be able to collect so they can be satisfied. And then, of course, figure out how to sell that house. Yeah. So I feel like they have been through more than probably most other clients you've dealt with on the front end.
Yep.
We've got a couple other weird properties coming up too.
We do.
Yeah. I literally just opened this while we were sitting here going, oh wait, I've got a couple other things I need to do for you. But I will say, working with your group, I'd like to take on some more cases so that we have additional stories to tell on I Hate Real Estate because
we're working on them.
These hindsights are really fun.
Well, we talked about COVID at the outset of the show, and it's prevented a lot of trial work, even basic hearings. It's prevented a lot of that in certain scenarios where a courtroom doesn't have the technology in some smaller counties. And we've got a lot of cases going in smaller counties because of the rice farmer case in Lone Oak led to a lot of cases involving not necessarily similar issues, but a lot of farming clients have gotten our names. And so we've got a lot of things in the eastern Arkansas area.
Well, and it's exciting for me, but it's also a little bit scary because you're doing some stuff with agriculture and that's a different kind of value and it's a different kind of appraisal. So I've got some friends I need to introduce you to. Yeah. But all that being said, when you talk about the COVID situation, there's also going to be a change, and I'm going to do this real quick before we leave. I didn't warn you, but I do have a question about that. All of the changes to the law that happened with like rent and landlords and things, isn't there some sort of issue now changing with the rent, or now it's, I don't know. I heard that the moratorium.
So there was the moratorium. It ended.
Okay, when did it end?
It ended yesterday.
Okay, so that's going to affect people. You're about to start dealing with all of that.
Yes.
Okay. That means people can now go through with evictions?
Yes.
Okay, and they weren't able to do that before.
Yeah, and I saw there was a big spat within Congress when they adjourned without extending it now that the cases are rising again.
Right.
But the CDC had said that July 31st was June 30th was the original expiration date of the eviction moratorium. And they said when they bumped it to August 1st that it was that was the last one.
Right.
And they probably regret saying that, but
yeah. Well, and I'm just curious to see what's going to go on because I just don't know. You know what I mean? I deal with so many landlords and so many tenants, and you do too. And each one handles their business differently, and each, so I would just,
We have a pending eviction case right now for a landlord that we represent, and I'm calling the court to set a hearing.
Yeah.
It's going to be a swarm of people calling the courts trying to set these hearings.
Yeah, well, you're going to be busy, but at least you have a fun place to come hang out and talk to me about all the things that you might hate.
My favorite part of our trial, I think it was yours too. We can close with this if you want to, but after you got done with your testimony and the opposing counsel got done questioning you, she renewed her motion to have you disqualified as an expert witness that you didn't qualify. And I stood up to walk up there, and the judge just went, "That'll be denied."
Oh yeah, that's true. I will give you that. That's what you should gavel on too. Is literally she said, "I renew my objection. She is not qualified." He said, "That'll be denied." That is a good way to go out, Kendall. I'm so thankful for you and another week of I Hate Real Estate. Next week, hopefully, we'll have a COVID-free guest and be able to COVID exposure-free guest and be able to sit and chat about what's going on in his world. And I will keep an eye out for any cases that come across your desk between now and then. And I'll see you next week in court.
Sounds good.
Very exciting. Thank you. All right, haters. We'll see you next time on an episode of I Hate Real Estate. We're out.